Detective Laura Hayes knew Brookhaven's quiet nights were over the moment a hooded figure vanished into the storm, turning a routine movie showing into a chilling hunt for a gunman who planned every step and left the entire town afraid of what might come next. The night began like any other Friday evening in the quiet town of Brookhaven, a place known for its sleepy streets and small-town charm. The Majestic Movie Theater, a decades-old building with a glowing marquee, stood as a beacon of excitement. Neon lights shimmered across rain-soaked pavement, drawing families, groups of friends, and couples out of their warm homes for the last showing of the newest action film. The air smelled of damp asphalt and popcorn, mixing into an oddly comforting scent that promised a cozy escape from the storm outside. Umbrellas dotted the sidewalk as people hurried inside, shaking off raindrops and chattering about the movie they were eager to see. Inside, the lobby buzzed with laughter and the crunch of snacks. The theater's creaky floors and vintage posters added to its charm, giving it the familiar feel of a favorite neighborhood gathering spot. Among the cheerful crowd, no one paid much attention to the solitary figure that entered just before the lights dimmed. This person moved with quiet precision, their hood pulled low, rainwater dripping onto the tiled floor. They purchased a ticket with exact change, never lifting their head enough for the attendant to see a face clearly. Carrying a small, nondescript backpack, the stranger slipped past the concession stand and into the dim hallway that led to the screening room. A faint trail of water followed their shoes, quickly lost in the shadows. Inside the theater, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. Seats filled quickly, and the audience settled into their places as the previews began to roll. The stranger chose a spot near the back, far enough to observe everything without drawing attention. Around them, people whispered about the weather, the plot of the film, and weekend plans. Children giggled as the giant screen came alive with color. The rain outside tapped steadily against the old windows, a soft percussion that blended with the surround sound. As the final preview ended and the feature presentation began, the lights dimmed further, wrapping the room in darkness except for the flickering glow of the screen. The mysterious figure remained perfectly still, eyes fixed ahead. No one noticed the slight tension in their posture or the way they clutched the strap of the backpack resting at their feet. The heavy doors at the back of the room eased shut with a quiet click, muffling the distant sound of thunder. What seemed like an ordinary evening at the movies was about to take a turn that no one inside the Majestic could have imagined, setting the stage for a night that would haunt Brookhaven for years to come. The film unfolded on the giant screen, drawing everyone into its fast-paced chase scenes and explosive soundtrack. The pounding rain outside seemed to echo the action, adding an eerie rhythm to the night. Viewers leaned forward in their seats, popcorn forgotten, eyes locked on the flickering images. Then, without warning, a sudden sharp crack split the air. At first, it blended with the movie's sound effects. A few people chuckled nervously, thinking it was part of the show. But a second, unmistakable bang followed, louder and closer, and the illusion shattered. Screams erupted as the crowd realized something was terribly wrong. Panic surged through the theater like a wave. Some people ducked instinctively, while others bolted for the exits, knocking over drinks and scattering popcorn across the sticky floor. The dark room became a blur of shadows and movement. The bright flashes from the screen threw frantic silhouettes against the walls, making it difficult to tell where the danger came from. The hooded figure stood briefly, a glint of metal in hand, before disappearing into the chaos. The old building's design worked against the crowd. Narrow aisles clogged with terrified moviegoers slowed every desperate attempt to escape. The heavy exit doors seemed farther away with each second. Children cried, parents shouted, and the steady patter of rain outside grew faint compared to the pounding of terrified footsteps. Someone triggered the fire alarm, and the shrill wail added to the confusion, masking the sound of anything else. In the panic, seats tipped over and shoes were left behind. When the first responding officers burst through the lobby doors, they expected to confront an active shooter. Instead, they found a theater emptied of its attacker. People stumbled into the stormy night, drenched and trembling, clutching each other as if holding on to reality itself. Only one victim lay injured near the back row, grazed by a bullet but still conscious. Paramedics rushed in while officers fanned out, searching every corner of the building. The hooded figure was gone, leaving behind only the acrid scent of gunpowder and the faint echo of terrified screams. Outside, flashing red and blue lights cut through the rain as police secured the area. Roads were blocked and neighboring businesses locked their doors. What had begun as an ordinary night at the movies now stood as a chilling crime scene. No one could explain how the gunman had vanished so completely. The only certainty was that Brookhaven's quiet reputation had been shattered in a matter of minutes, and a dangerous predator was now somewhere out in the dark. Detective Laura Hayes arrived before dawn, her coat soaked by the lingering drizzle, as she stepped beneath the flashing crime scene lights. The Majestic Movie Theater, usually a cheerful landmark, now looked like a hollow relic. Police tape fluttered across the entrance, while forensic teams moved methodically through the silent building. The acrid scent of gunpowder still hung in the air. Officers briefed her on the chaos: a single injured victim recovering at the hospital, no fatalities, and a shooter who seemed to have melted into the night. For a town as small as Brookhaven, it felt like a phantom attack. Surveillance footage offered only frustration. Cameras outside captured a shadowy figure sprinting into the rain-slicked alley behind the theater, hood drawn tight, face hidden. Streetlights blurred through the downpour, making it impossible to identify anything more than a vague silhouette. Inside the theater, investigators dusted every surface for prints, but the seats, door handles, and even the railings were wiped clean. Whoever planned this had thought ahead, leaving nothing but the faint smell of damp fabric and smoke. The single clue came from an overlooked corner of the last row, a crumpled movie ticket with a jagged tear along one edge. It seemed unremarkable at first, but Hayes treated it as precious evidence. The torn stub suggested a second piece, perhaps kept by the shooter, perhaps still somewhere in town. While officers canvassed nearby streets, residents whispered about strange happenings that had begun days earlier. Several reported glimpses of someone peering through their windows at night. In each story, the figure disappeared before anyone could call the police, as if watching and waiting. Hayes followed every thread. She interviewed the injured moviegoer, who remembered only a flash of movement and the metallic gleam of a weapon before ducking for cover. Patrol officers knocked on doors throughout Brookhaven, but every lead dissolved into rumor. The shooter seemed to vanish just as easily as the storm clouds that had swept through. By evening, fear spread faster than facts. Parents kept children home from school, shopkeepers closed early, and neighbors double-checked locks. Before nightfall, the Majestic's glowing marquee remained dark, a silent warning of what had happened inside. Hayes knew the attacker was still nearby, patient and calculating. Somewhere in Brookhaven, the person who had turned a night of entertainment into terror was watching the town react, hidden behind the same rain-soaked streets where their trail had first disappeared. Days of tension passed before a breakthrough finally emerged, and it arrived from an unexpected place. 2 hours away in the city of Fairview, a pawn shop owner contacted Brookhaven authorities after seeing a news report about the theater shooting. The man explained that someone had sold him a handgun late at night, paying no attention to price or paperwork. The weapon's description matched the ballistic report from the Majestic incident. Detective Laura Hayes seized on the lead immediately, sending the gun for testing. Within a day, forensic analysis confirmed it was the same firearm used during the attack, a chilling connection that reignited the stalled investigation. Security footage from the pawn shop added another layer of mystery. The camera captured a figure wearing a familiar dark jacket and a low baseball cap, head angled downward to avoid recognition. Although the image was grainy, Hayes recognized the same careful posture seen on the theater's exterior cameras. This suspect was meticulous, almost rehearsed in the way they concealed every detail. Still, the pawn ticket provided a small thread to pull, tracing the seller's movements to a rural area on the outskirts of Brookhaven. An abandoned farmhouse became the focus of the search. Weathered wood and sagging beams marked the property, hidden behind a curtain of overgrown trees and weeds. At dawn, a tactical team moved in, their boots sinking into damp earth as mist curled through the fields. The interior of the house smelled of mildew and smoke, an unsettling mix that suggested recent occupation. Dust lay thick on most surfaces, but a single candle on a kitchen counter still held warmth, its wick blackened from a recent flame. Investigators spread through the rooms and discovered something even more unsettling. Maps of the Majestic Movie Theater covered a wall, each marked with arrows and notes. Newspaper clippings detailed the shooting and the subsequent panic, while photographs of crowded places, parks, shopping centers, schoolyards were pinned in careful rows. A battered backpack similar to the one witnesses described rested in a corner, empty except for a few rounds of ammunition. Despite the wealth of evidence, the suspect remained elusive. No footprints led away from the house, and neighbors had seen nothing but fog and rain. The faint warmth of the candle suggested the intruder had slipped away only moments before the team arrived. Hayes stared at the maps, her resolve hardening. The attacker was close, clever, and still planning something bigger. The farmhouse offered clues, but the hunt was far from over, and every hour that passed meant the next move could already be underway. The manhunt stretched into its second week as Brookhaven transformed from a peaceful town into a place on edge. Roadblocks ringed the main highways, and patrol cars prowled every backstreet. Flyers bearing a grainy silhouette of the hooded suspect hung in store windows and on lampposts. Neighbors who once greeted each other warmly now kept curtains drawn and doors bolted. Despite the increased security, the attacker seemed to dissolve into the landscape, always one step ahead of the search. Detective Laura Hayes worked nearly around the clock, convinced the farmhouse discovery meant the suspect was preparing another strike. Each night brought an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant wail of sirens echoing through rain-soaked streets. The break finally came on a cold, windswept evening when Officer Mark Bell, patrolling the freight yard on the town's industrial edge, spotted a lone figure moving between rows of rusted railcars. The person matched the suspect's description almost perfectly: same dark jacket, same deliberate movements. Bell radioed for backup and followed quietly, his footsteps muffled by the gravel and the steady hiss of light rain. The figure tried to disappear into the maze of metal and shadows, but floodlights from arriving units snapped on, washing the yard in stark white. Surrounded, the suspect bolted, slipping across the slick ground in a desperate sprint. Rain worked against the fugitive. Boots skidded on wet steel and mud, giving officers the seconds they needed to close in. Hayes arrived as the chase reached its climax, her heart pounding as she joined the pursuit. The suspect darted toward a chain-link fence, but stumbled before reaching it, splashing into a shallow puddle. Officers closed the circle and, without a single shot fired, pulled the figure to the ground. The long hunt was over in an instant. Back at headquarters, the unmasking shocked the entire team. The captured man was a former employee of the Majestic Movie Theater, dismissed weeks earlier for erratic behavior and repeated absences. Old personnel records revealed complaints of unpredictable outbursts and growing resentment toward management. Yet when questioned, he refused to speak, staring blankly as detectives laid out the evidence: the weapon, the maps, the farmhouse. His silence left the town without a clear motive, only speculation and unease. Brookhaven gradually began to breathe again, but the memory of that stormy night clung to its streets and to the walls of the shuttered theater. Even as life resumed, a quiet awareness lingered. Ordinary evenings can fracture without warning, and danger can hide behind the most familiar faces.